The day that Brandon moved out of early intervention was the saddest day of my life. And I have to say that for me, it was. The transition process in and of itself was smooth. We met with the school psychologist, we talked with the district, we had the IEP in place, we knew what was going to happen. But on graduation day from his early intervention center, I bawled my head off.
The transition process from going from birth to 3 to an ECAP program was fabulous. The baton went perfectly to the point that the teachers from ECAP, the preschool, came into my home, met my boys, met me, and the transition was perfect. I called, you know, every component of that transition was terrific. I called transportation. I met the person ahead of transportation. I went and looked at the bus. What does that look like? What's a lift? All of that went very, very, very well.
I can't just take him to a preschool and say, you know, he's allergic to penicillin. Have fun. That's not going to happen. So the layers there were pretty unexpected to me. This is the first time that I'd been through anything like this, despite having 4 older children, and just having things more explicitly laid out for me in that regard would have been useful.
Our transition wasn't as smooth as it probably should have been. Looking back now, I know that I should have had a more thorough interview with the developmental preschool. It was near the end of summer, so things were a little disjointed. The developmental school was letting out, so it was hard trying to coordinate times with the OT and the speech pathologist to really sit down, and I felt like maybe my FRC dropped the ball in that area a little bit.
The transition from IFSP to IEP was a little bumpy. Quinn was kind of borderline medically fragile, and we'd had nebulizer with inhaled steroids. As we worked on the IEP, the idea from our pediatrician was that we needed to consider having some services at home and then talk about how we would transition him into a classroom so that it wouldn't be a health threat. And it was a tough conversation to have with the school district. The nurse in particular was unconvinced. I was just stunned to get in there and have that as the response. And thankfully, the preschool teacher stepped in and said, you know, we can start him out on my planning day and we can have him come in. We'll wipe down the equipment and things like we do for other kids that are borderline, but we'll still leave the house and just see how it goes. And so we managed his first set of preschool in the previous school year by just being very careful. And if kids were at all sick, we stayed home. And it was the first year that we had not had to use the nebulizer since he was born. And I mean, grateful beyond words that that's how it worked out. But it was a tough conversation to have, and he missed months and months worth of time with the school that he could have had if we could have arrived at something more quickly. And I think, and I will allow that I could be wrong, that would have been an easier thing if we'd had something more explicit for transition from IFSP to IEP.
And I also know that there's families that we even went to birth to 3 with that didn't qualify to continue on to qualify for services and didn't know what to do. They didn't qualify for anything. So FRCs and service providers knowing what's in their community, that they can offer that to families to say, this is what's available in our community. This is what's available in your community. Knowing what the resources are where you're at is so important for families. Families are worried about taking care of their kids. They're not out there doing detective work finding out what resources are available. They really want that FRC to help guide them and help show them, even when they're getting ready to leave that early intervention system, that a FRC can still give you that little bit more of information that you need to go on to be successful, I think is really important for families, so they're not left holding the bag going, now what do I do?